Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Nicole McLaughlin, and I am the Marketing Specialist at Alessa by Tier 1 Financial Solutions, and today's moderator. I hope everyone is doing well, and thank you for joining us. Our presenters today are Andrew Simpson and Ronny Miranda. Andrew has more than 25 years of experience building businesses in the field of information systems, audit and security, data analytics, anti-money laundering, and forensics. He's a regular thought leader and contributor to conferences. He is also the former chairperson of Simpson Consulting, an IT security and consulting firm. Ronny Miranda is a seasoned IT business professional with over 20 years experience in the IT field, from sales to consulting to accounts management. He has been CAM certified since 2019. As a solutions consultant for Alessa, Ronny provides sound and effective technical solutions for compliance teams across the globe.
All right. Thank you, Nicole. Well, good afternoon. I think it might be morning in some places as well. Thank you all for joining. I'm hoping that everyone is starting to get back out again and get back on the road, doing a little bit of traveling. Ronny and I, we were at ACAMS in Florida recently, and it was just so nice to see so many people back out post-COVID, enjoying themselves, having person-to-person type contact. So that's always been great. So thank you for joining us today. Ronny and I, we're going to have a pretty light-hearted, not too presentation today. We're going to show a little bit of the product. We're just going to talk through some of the pain points and how we're addressing it. And then, we're hoping that you're going to ask a lot of questions. We're leaving a lot of time for questions as well. So feel free, go ahead, ask questions. I'm here, Ronny and myself will try to answer as many questions as possible. So in terms of the agenda, I'm just going to go through some things that we see happening in the industry, some emerging trends. We did a survey recently, and we're going to talk about that. And then Ronny is going to take about maybe 20-25 minutes, just walk through how at Alessa we're solving some of these challenges and problems. And then after that, we're just going to wrap things up a bit and try to answer as many questions as possible. So I know some of you have interacted with me before, and it's a good opportunity for you to just pretty much ask anything. Any question that you ask, I'm pretty certain we'll be able to answer. Let's talk a little bit about the trends that we're seeing here. Hundreds of persons responded to that survey, and some of you are on the call that's on the webinar today, participated in it. And some of the things that we're seeing that's really intriguing is we're seeing that 45% of our respondents were saying that, they're having challenges making a clear connection between a client and, say, high-risk entities, meaning although you're doing business with Andrew, when I'm evaluating Andrew's risk, I'm not able to navigate his relationships, whether they are direct or implied relationships to other third parties and their associated risk to overall impact Andrew's risk score. So that's one of the challenges that we're seeing out there. Another thing that we're seeing, and if you have been to any of the conferences recently, I think when I go to the conferences, there are more people talking about crypto than anything else. And I think that there's a lot of focus that's happening on that. We've been partnering with some of our crypto intelligence firms, trying to address this area for some of our customers as well. But 50% of people think that, this is an area that needs a little bit more attention. Too manual. We had almost 40% of our respondents saying that, look, the compliance program is too manual, too many manual tasks, too many steps that they have to go through in investigations. So those are some of the things that we're seeing. Then risk models is another thing. And we've been seeing more and more of this from our own customers as well, where we're getting more questions around AI models as well, in terms of testing, validating, third-party testing as well. Quite a lot of our customers now, almost on an annual basis, they're having the algorithms and the models being tested by third parties just to make sure it's what it's supposed to be. And then, of course, just some of the respondents said that their risk modeling is somewhat black box and they can't understand what the factors are, the weights, and how they're applied. Those are some of the things that we're seeing in terms of the challenges that you're all dealing with. Please feel free to, in the chat, talk about any other challenge that you're having that may not have been listed here in the top 5. And of course, that has other implications, meaning that when you just look at globally what the fines were in 2021, it's almost $1.6 billion. So, that's billion with a B. So in this space, you would think that, financial institutions are getting their act together, but the truth is that you're seeing that the number of institutions being fined more than tripled in 2021 as well. So one of the other things that I know our chief compliance officers are very concerned about is there any direct or personal impact on me as an individual in these situations? And we've seen that there were 16 instances where compliance professionals were fined individually in 2021. And, FinCEN, they imposed over $600 million of fines between just January of last year and March this year. So the fines are not stopping, the sanctions are not stopping, and of course, some of you would have been part of just the complexities around what would have happened with the new Russian sanctions and implementing those and so on. So I think this is a very active landscape in terms of what is going on in your industry, in our industry, I should say, and technology is going to play a big part in that. So many of you have been on many webinars with Alessa, and we have always been an organization that focuses a lot on just education. And one of the things that we wanted to do with this webinar, which is a little bit different, is just talk about our own technology and how we're addressing some. So many of our customers all over the world, they select Alessa because Alessa is a single platform. They don't have to have one platform doing KYC or CDD, and then something else doing regulatory reporting and something else doing transaction monitoring, and then you take all of that and you put it into a separate case manager. Alessa is one platform that does the whole thing. The other thing too is that we have seen some of our customers experience amazing growth during the pandemic, especially in the fintech space. We've seen some of our customers really they're just growing leaps and bounds exponentially. And the good thing with us is that we have been able to scale with them. So maybe 2-3 years ago, they were pushing 100,000 transactions through our platform. Now they're doing 20 million transactions, but it's the same technology that they're using. So this is scaling across their growth pattern. And another thing too is that it's highly configurable. So the thing that we're also seeing is that the AML regulations are now impacting many other non-traditional FIs. So we're seeing a lot of interest from gaming, and in a lot of different fintechs are coming to the table as well. And the good thing is that we're not trying to take a banking solution and trying to fix their industry. So we're able to configure the technology to fit various industries, and that is good. So some of our customers, they have a bank, they have an insurance company, they have a payment platform, they have a business, and they're using the same solution to address all of it. All investors workflow automation, all of that is being done in the same platform. So it means that the intelligence from your investigative process is not being lost, because that is one of the things that we use to refine and automate investigation processes going forward, right? So we can deploy it in compliance, we can deploy it in operations. One of the things that we talk about a lot with Alessa is we're able to deploy Alessa to as many persons in the organization as possible, meaning that you're creating a culture of compliance, and you're not having a situation where it's just the compliance team alone that has all the burden, that's doing everything. No, Alessa is deployed all the way into the branches, into the remote locations. So if a wire transfer initiated at a particular location, or a customer is being onboarded at a particular location, the alerts will go back to those locations. So instead of having compliance dealing with everything, you have a workflow or an operational process where Alessa is wired within your day-to-day processes and is not individual separate process. One of the big things that we've also seen over the last 3 years is the interest in real-time integrations and also real-time interdiction, meaning a lot of organizations, especially Fintechs, they want the compliance process to work the same way that all of their other processes are working. So they don't want to have a situation where it's after the fact, looking at transactions at the end of the day. They want transactions to be scored as they're going through their platform and stopped if the risk score on it is very high. So real-time integration, that's a big part of some of the things that we're seeing. Lots of different API integration going on. Once we are in all of that, it is one platform, everything is in the same platform, including your visualizations, your workflows, your ongoing risk scoring, all of that is in the same platform. And I think when Ronny walks through and starts showing you the technology stack today, you will get a good feel for why that is important and how that enhances the investigative process and that investigative experience that is needed to have the kind of productivity that most compliance departments are looking to achieve. So that's it at a high level. I think a lot of you probably want to see what Ronny's going to show. So I'm just going to pass back control to Nicole and Ronny, and you guys can take it from here.
Thank you, Drew. Get Ronny up and running.
While we're switching to Ronny as well, one of the things that I would encourage everyone to do is go ahead, ask questions, post your questions, post your comments. Even if we don't have follow up and try to provide responses as we continue.
Thank you, Andrew. Ronny, you are live.
Absolutely. Thank you. Can you see my screen?
We can.
Okay, excellent. So thank you, everyone. And today's demonstration, I will talk about from the perspective of a compliance user. I'm going to be playing the role of a financial institutions compliance user, and I'm going to show you from the perspective of the customer's journey from the onboarding to their transactional behavior down to the whole details of what we can do in Alessa. So let's begin. The first thing we want to ensure as a compliance team is that, especially during the onboarding process, we ensure that our new customers are screened. And for that, Alessa provides the ability to, as Andrew was mentioning, a real-time integration and interdiction. And that's the example that I have right here. So let's suppose that I'm the compliance team, part of the compliance team, and I just receive an alert telling me or informing me that there is a match in a sanction list from a customer that is being just onboarded. And while this happens in real time, the onboarding process is being put on hold on the financial institutions' core system. So we can do this automatically. We can allow Alessa to automatically make a decision, or a compliance user just like me can make a decision such as the one that I'm going to demonstrate. But let's begin. The first thing that I would do after I log into Alessa is to open up the alert. In this case, you see this is the infraction list alert. And as I open it, what I need to understand is why there was a match on this individual. What we have here on the left side is that Alessa is bringing to our attention there was an exact match on the potential customer's name, Mr. Sanjivan Sangrupra. The reason we see here is basically the information that is brought to our attention from one of our data partners, and it's telling us this individual's profile, including where he's from, what are his known aliases, a bit of his biography. But what I'm interested in looking at is the reason why he was flagged. I see here that he's PEP, but he's also sanctioned. So he's a sanctioned PEP. Now, I need to better understand what is going on around this individual. The report tab will tell me everything that we know about this individual, including things like he's been in connections with arms deals. He's also been counterfeiting currency, and he's been related to illicit diamond trade. So definitely an individual we don't want to do business with. But what happens if instead of himself, he sends in a front man? For instance, we got that covered too if he sends in someone such as Mr. Charles Taylor over here. Well, if he's a sanctioned individual as well or a PEP, we can see his profile by simply drilling down and expanding on his connections tab. So for that, Alessa has all the information as well. But going back to Mr. Rupra here, we can see additional information such as what are the sanction lists he might be in or the locations he is known from. We can see a detail of every sanction that is under his belt and the different sources that allow us to better understand where this information was collected from. So we have all this wealth of information, and we can even go to those sources if necessary as part of our due diligence effort. So in this case, now what I will do is confirm this identity, making sure that this is the individual we have in front of us. And as I mentioned, since this was a part of the onboarding process, the next step is to make a decision, to take an action. That's exactly what I will do. By simply clicking on the action button here, I'm going to decline his application. As we said, we simply don't want to do business with this individual. I will get into more details in a few seconds as to the alert management process, but for now, just keep in mind that what I just did was via interdiction, decline this individual's application. Now, moving on to the other customers who have already been cleared, whether it's during onboarding and periodically, the new customers or the existing ones perform their transactions through our financial institution. And we also have the ability, by leveraging Alessa, to ensure that the transactions that they have engaged in have been monitored for potentially suspicious activity. And for that, Alessa offers a series of what we call scenarios that are part of our transaction monitoring capabilities, including some examples that I've brought today, such as high-risk countries fund transfers, location jumping, rapid loan repayment, or structuring. So let's take a look at one of those. Again, as a compliance user, I would get an alert telling me that I have certain items assigned for my remediation. So I will log in and start looking at those alerts. So let's take one, for example, rapid loan repayment. I'm going to go to this report and open up one of the alerts and see what's been brought to my attention by Alessa. The first thing that we will notice is that the alert tells us that Ms. Rajesh Stanley has been paid has paid multiple loans in a very short time. That's, of course, is suspicious under the rapid loan repayment scenario. It tells us some of the data points that I must be aware of, such as the most recent repayment. I can take a look at the description so I can see what it's all about. Also, I will look at the details of this alert so I know who we are dealing with, what is the alert, what are the details of this individual's account. But then I'm also interested in understanding the activity of the repayment process that made this a suspicious transaction. And in here, we see that there has been very short time between a loan disbursement and a loan repayment. So that definitely makes it very suspicious. One other element that I need to consider is that in Alessa, we can consolidate the information. We can get the profile of this individual so I can have a better source of information as a compliance user. And I can go directly into this individual's profile, the KYC file, if you will, or customer view, and see everything we know about her. In this case, her transaction profile, if there is any alerts related to her, any cases, etc. Once I've collected all this information, read all this information, the next step is, depending on what I need to do, I would perhaps, let's suppose, say that maybe I'm a junior analyst. I want to make sure that I follow the organization's guidelines, the department's guidelines to tackle this type of alert. So for that, Alessa also includes a resolution guidelines section that will tell me what steps I need to follow to tackle this type of alerts. So once I've read and understood, I make sure that I have everything I need, then this is where I take action. All these actions here include capabilities to attach documents, add comments, flags, etc., and also transition these alerts or even escalate if necessary. Again, supposing that I'm a junior analyst, maybe my actions are limited to just escalate to a manager or close the alert. Maybe I don't have the ability to make a harsh decision as to suspending the customer's account or blocking a transaction. So in this case, this is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to escalate to my manager. And in here, I'm going to select Ms. Brenda Jones, my manager, and I'm going to document my findings. So I will say, based on my findings, etc., blah, blah, blah. So I would just simply document everything in here. I can even select from predefined comments. I will select escalation that is being taken place, and I can attach documents. For instance, any document that will help me with my due diligence, such as an individual's this individual's document of identification or any other document that will help with the due diligence effort. Once I'm done, what I'm going to do now is simply hit the save button here, and two things will happen. Number one, my manager, Ms. Jones, will receive an email telling her, hey, Brenda, Ronny has just assigned an alert for your remediation. Please log in and begin the work on Alessa. And number two, there will be an entry in the history of this alert containing everything that has just taken place, including who did what, at what time, what comments were added, what documents were attached. Everything is documented, logged, and tracked in Alessa. And this is done for two purposes. Number one, so that my manager or even myself in the future can see what's been done to remediate this alert. And number two, as an audit trail. So this is how we remediate alerts. And going back to my main view where I have all the alerts, let's suppose now that I have just recently received a structuring alert. And at this point, based on my due diligence, my efforts, this is where we have to make a decision as to, for instance, filing a regulatory report. I'm going to demonstrate how to file a SAR under FinCEN's jurisdiction, but keep in mind we have the ability to do this for any jurisdiction, including the Caribbean, including Southeast Asia, Africa, etc. We can do any kind of integration for those regulatory bodies. So, for instance, let's suppose that I have this alert for Mr. Ryan telling us that he's been engaged in some structuring activity. Based on my efforts, my due diligence, and the information we've collected, we have determined that at this point we need to file a SAR. So that's exactly what I'm going to do by simply pushing a button in Alessa. Alessa will simply allow me to run a process automatically to pre-populate the fields of a SAR, including everything we know about this transactions, this individual, everything will be pre-populated. And most of all, Alessa will also verify any information that they may be missing based on what we have. After I've corrected and saved all that information, then I'm ready to submit. And for that, I'm going to show you an example of a SAR that has been assigned to myself by my manager, who is asking me to proceed with the e-filing of this report. Keep in mind that this e-filing capability is available for Canada and the U.S. So at this point, my manager is asking me to complete the submission of this report. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. By actioning this alert, I can simply hit the submit to regulator report and action, and then the report will be sent to FinCEN for validation. And this is all based and all powered by a workflow that will allow us to e-file directly this report to FinCEN. All of these wealth of information can also be leveraged to create what we call the risk profile. So basically everything a customer does in our financial institution can be monitored and also used as factors for risk profiles. Anything that the customer is, the customer data properties, geographic location, etc., that is also leveraged by Alessa or can be leveraged by Alessa, included in their risk profile, and a risk score can be calculated and assigned. So let me show you one of the examples that we have today where one of our customers has been flagged or has been deemed as higher risk. We have Mr. Charles White here, where, as I said, he's been flagged or deemed as higher risk individual. We have his profile information, but what I'm really interested is in understanding why he's been flagged as high. In this case, we take a look at his score, which is reaching 75% at this point. This is all based on what's known as factors accumulation, which basically taking into consideration different factors that are all calculated automatically by Alessa. And this includes things like his age or whether he's a PEP or not, the jurisdiction he operates from, whether he's been flagged in instruction alerts or any other type of alerts, etc. These are all adding a certain weight to the final score, accruing up to 75%, which is considered to be high. At this point, after I've understood his current risk profile, I am ready to make further decisions. But it's important to know how all this information can also be leveraged, especially from the manager's perspective, to understand how our compliance program is being managed, what data that we need to understand is essentially all the way that Alessa can provide feedback to, especially managers, to know whether alerts, how many alerts have been generated, how many of those alerts are open, closed, etc. And for that, we have a series of dashboards that take advantage of that wealth of information generated throughout Alessa, including, as I mentioned, what alerts are, how many alerts are open, what's the average closing time, what is the state they're in or the status they're in, the scenarios that have generated, etc. And we can even drill down and filter in real time this information. For instance, let's take a look only at those alerts that are open. In real time, Alessa will refresh the information and provide us with an updated view. I can even go further and drill down. So for instance, let's take a look at the ones that are only under investigation. I simply double click on it and I see how many alerts have been generated by date, by scenario, by state. And I see here that by analyst, Ronny has 5 alerts recently that are in state that are under investigation versus 1 alert that Ben has. So maybe Ronny is lagging behind. Maybe as a manager, I can say, well, he needs some help, maybe additional training, etc. And as other elements of data can be leveraged in Alessa, we can also have different views regarding the screening process. For instance, we better understand how our screening capabilities have been put in place. And again, we can filter down and we can say things like, I just want those who have a status of enhanced due diligence or more information required. For instance, I can filter down and say, well, out of the alerts that we have, only 2 that have generated under those state, and they contain 4 potentially identified prospects. Out of those, 1 is a confirmed hit. And then we can say how many alerts by category, also by type, and where are these individuals from? What's their nationality? We can have all this information, even drill down and filter out as required. And to finalize the presentation today, I am going to show the risk profile history in terms of how we understand our customers' risk profile. If you remember, the risk model is based on factors. So for that example, we have Ms. Stacy Valdez here, where we see each one of the different factors at the bottom that light up and tell us the differences, the changes in her score over time. As you see, the different factors light up representing the changes. They tell us a story that essentially confirms that Ms. Valdez was a low-risk individual, and her score is slowly going down. And this is achieved by one of the properties of the factors called the decay, which essentially removes the weight that these factors have on the overall score over time, unless she engaged in new activity, which is exactly what happened a few months down the line. As you see, new factors kicked in, the score increased until she reached a higher level of her risk. And then again, goes down based on this decay, the capability of removing some of the weight. But then it goes up, and that's how we understand how her risk level has behaved over time. Okay, so with this, I conclude this part of the presentation. Nicole, back to you.
Thanks, Ronnie. I'm just going to pass the presentation back over to Andrew here and go over pulling it all together, the big picture.
Yeah. All right. While I'm pulling that up, remember to go ahead, ask questions, and some of the stuff that you should hopefully write. We're getting a question around. While I'm doing that, though, modeling. And one of the things that someone was asking is, can we do that on an ongoing basis? Can we do the scoring and so on an ongoing basis? Could you want to respond to that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the scoring is based on an automated process. The answer is yes, it takes place in an ongoing basis. Periodically, Alessa will leverage the factors that create that risk model and calculates the risk score of an entity, a customer, or any other individual that is being analyzed for the risk profile purposes. So when Alessa ingests the information that is generated throughout a period of time, it recalculates automatically the score, and also it creates this series of historic records so we can analyze how the risk score of an individual has changed over time.
Yeah, one of the things that we're also seeing is, I think a few years ago when we talked about risk scoring and risk, a lot of our clients talked about doing that maybe every 6 months. Then persons started to say, hey, we need to do that quarterly. Then we got down to, well, can we score daily? And then we have a couple of customers in recent times that have worked with us to do real-time scoring, which means that we're scoring an entity all the time in real time as something changes. The score is being updated. That's very ambitious. That's there are ups and downs to doing that, but pros and cons, I should say. So you have to balance that with, what is really the work load that it's going to create. So what we have also seen is in those situations where we're doing it on a real-time basis, that the investigative is looking for situations where the score has gone like from very high to critical, and only those they look at in real time. But the rest of it, they just continue to look at it on a periodic basis, right? So I think that is okay as well. So let me just go through pulling it all together, and then one of the things that I'm going to be doing too is getting Nicole to ask a few questions at the end based on what you've submitted to her. So first thing is, look, in terms of pulling it all together, one of the things that I think, Ronnie, you didn't show your identity verification, but that's one of the things that we're doing a lot of right now, especially in North America. So sometimes the question is, if you don't even know that the identity is valid or good, then how are you doing the due diligence? Beyond that, like why are you going to screen Andrew Simpson if that's not even a real identity? So validating and verifying the identity, then doing the due diligence work, that's one of the things that's happening. We're also seeing, as I said, a lot more real-time transaction monitoring. Screening has always been real-time, periodic, on-demand, that kind of stuff. But we're also seeing big demands for persons to incorporate crypto in their watch list process and their risk scoring process, and cannabis as well, primarily in the States. We're seeing stuff in terms of cannabis. This risk scoring that Ronnie showed you, you see that there has to be a high level of ability in the risk score, because you have to be able to defend it and you have to be able to understand it. And I think that's one of the things that we're seeing a lot of demands around, the weights, the factors, how long should the risk score remain in effect? Should it reset after a period of time? So a lot of that configurability is stuff that we're seeing happening as well. The reg reporting is more a matter of making sure that you can execute on that properly. I mean, one of our customers, they have like 6,000 stores in North America, and they process a lot of money transfers and stuff like that. And for them, just being able to, almost in a lights out fashion, being able to submit a high percentage of the SARs is a major burden lifted off their shoulders, not just in terms of headcount, but using highly qualified compliance people to do stuff that's not as tedious. Incorporating AI in the investigative process is, so today our chief data scientist and I, we were having a long conversation about some of the new stuff that we're doing in terms of AI and machine learning. And there are two aspects to it. There is the aspect that is heavily dependent on data and the quality of data that customers give you to build and train models and stuff like that. But then there is also the data that we control. So the good thing with Alessa is that all the investigative data is there, and so that allows us to build AI models that can refine and improve the investigative process. And a lot of customers, one thing that we're seeing is, if it is that I am getting a lot of alerts, should I just adjust my risk tolerance and get less? Or can we find ways to automate and improve the investigative and clearing process? So I think like those are some of the things that you're going to see start emerging, and it's really important. One of the things that Ronnie showed you is just, just dashboards, reporting, automated workflows and case management. Those things are critical. getting insights in terms of what is happening is important. So those are some of the components. And, you know, we talk about a few of our customers that we have and the work that we've been doing with them. But I think that for you to gain a little bit more, and I think if some of you are interested in taking a closer look at what we're doing around identity verification, that you might want to reach out and get Ronnie to probably do that area. Okay.
So this is a reminder that a link to the recording and slides will be emailed within the next 10 days. Resources will also be made available on our website at tier1fin.com/Alessa. Once again, we would like to thank Andrew and Ronnie for leading today's webinar and providing great insight into effectively managing AML compliance systems without breaking the bank. And thank you to our audience for joining us and engaging in the content. They were all really great questions, and it goes to show we have a few additional questions to answer following. A reminder that you're able to raise your hand following this webinar if you just wait for the survey to pop up, and you can speak to a risk specialist for some more in-depth information. This now concludes our presentation. Thank you and have a great day.